Hey everyone! So I was sent Razzo by Total Boat and I am so excited to try this. I have so many ideas, but what you take is this like mineral powder type stuff, you mix it with the liquid type stuff here in the back, and it creates like a plaster appearance. I've never used Razzo, so I'm excited to see how it turns out. Right off the bat, I want to apologize. I am stuffy because I unfortunately came down with a cold, but I promise to keep it as interesting as I can. So step 1, it says to shake. I'm not sure if that's needed for the powder, but I'm going to follow the instructions. So reading the ratios, this is a 1:2 ratio, 1 being the liquid and 2 being this mineral powder. And they actually made B green so that it keeps it easier to understand. And they kept A as the blue. Now reading the instructions on the bag, it has the exact same steps. So step 1 was to shake it until you think it is fully mixed. Now I haven't opened this yet, so I'm going to put on my gloves that was actually provided with this little Razzo kit. Yeah, I was super impressed with the kit. It came with a mold, popsicle sticks, the actual mineral powder and the liquid and measuring cups and a scoop, and it just was like a complete set. You don't have to buy anything. It even came with this blue mat that I'm working on. Now, since this is my first time using this, I decided to just do 3 ounces, and since this is a 2-to-1, you need 1 ounce of liquid and 2 ounces of the mineral powder. I'm just double checking that I'm reading this right, and after I add my mineral powder, it says to mix until smooth. Now, the cool thing about this scoop is that it actually has little measurements on the side. To get 2 ounces, I need 60 milliliters, and this one stops counting at 50, so I just went ahead and scooped 2 times at 30 to get 2 ounces. Now, I usually like to measure by weight. However, the instructions specifically said to measure my volume, so I just kind of was patting the powder inside the little cup here to get as close to 30 as I could. So now it says to mix it together until it is smooth. This is actually really thick. For some reason I was thinking it was more liquid. This thing kind of started out like frosting, which is cool. It was just not what I was expecting. It says that should only be like a minute. It looked pretty smooth to me, and I didn't really have a plan. Since this is my first time, I really just wanted to see if I could get the like ratio down right. So I just grabbed black because you can never go wrong with black. But I ended up not adding enough, and it gave me this really cool kind of cement gray with tiny hints of black throughout, so it's like a marble cement, and I went ahead and kept it. I decided on using the coaster mold that actually came with the Razzo kit. It's just a little square coaster mold, and honestly it looks a little warped, but I'm not too concerned with it since I'm kind of just experimenting at this point. It says that it'll be cured enough to demold at an hour, but it actually won't be its full strength until 24 hours after. So you kind of have to smear this in like it's really thick peanut butter. At this point I'm kind of second guessing myself, but I guess we'll find out at the end of the video if I did it right or wrong. I didn't have a plan for how I wanted to design my first coaster, but I thought about leaving this corner open and possibly adding an alternate color of Razzo. In the end, I actually decided to use epoxy. After I scraped all of the Razzo that I had in my container into the mold, it didn't look like it was leveling out and becoming smooth, so I decided to just gently lift it up and let it fall. My way of thinking was it would also pop bubbles. I will check back in 1 hour to see how much it's cured. Okay, it has been a 1 hour mark, and while it's hard sounding here, it's not towards the center, so I'm going to check it again in 1 more hour. Okay, this is hour 2, and it sounds pretty solid all the way through. This would be okay to demold, but I actually want to pour epoxy in here, so I'm just going to flip it over and look. I don't see any bubbles or anything I don't like, so I'm going to go ahead and fill this with epoxy resin now. I wanted to see what this light blue alcohol ink would actually look like in it. I'm hoping it gives it like a watery look. The brand of the alcohol ink that I'm using is actually T-Rex ink, and I'll provide a link down below with the rest of the supplies. So I found this piece of Mylar and I thought it would look really cool in this gap, so I went ahead and just took my mold here and I traced it around with a Sharpie and cut it out. I figured it would be easier just to try to match up the square than it would be to try and fill in the gap itself. I wasn't sure if the Razzo would release some bubbles, but I went ahead and sprayed some isopropyl alcohol before I poured in my epoxy. I really didn't want bubbles. Unfortunately, I did get some bubbles. It's probably because of the resin that I'm currently using. It doesn't like to be poured very thick, and it tends to auto-cure if you pour too thick. So when I do this again, I'll definitely be using a different type of resin. So please keep that in mind when you are using your resin, what the depth maximum is. I think a lot of us can agree that we're all our own worst critic, so while I think that the Mylar made this look super amazing, I can't get over the tiny micro bubbles that are in it. However, I really like the way the Razzo feels. It gives a nice contrast between the clear epoxy. It doesn't seem flexible, and I really just like how lightweight it is. I realized it was difficult to see the micro bubbles that were bothering me, so I decided to hold it up to my little work lamp that I have at my table, and as you can see, there is a ton of tiny little bubbles. So I'm taking some liquid latex just to protect the surface that I don't want epoxy resin to touch. And I'm taking my gloved finger and dipping it in the epoxy resin and filling in all of the little holes that I can feel on the surface. I'm aware that there are bubbles in the actual epoxy, and I unfortunately can't fix those. So here's a side-by-side of the before and the after I applied the epoxy resin. I think it looks better. I'm upset that I can't get rid of the other bubbles, but I'm just going to pretend that it is like ice and they're supposed to be there. My final thoughts on Razzo is it's actually pretty fun to use. It's not too hard to figure out the ratios, it's lightweight, and a great alternative to epoxy resin. The only drawback is that it's opaque, but that actually makes it better if you're looking for a plaster or concrete texture. In the end, I decided to turn this into a trinket dish. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to see my future art videos.